He said his mother was sick. He said he had to leave town. He said he needed space to deal with the stress. But the moment I checked the truth for myself, I learned he was not grieving. He was celebrating. The night he told me, I remember the way he stood in the hallway, half in shadow, half pretending to be broken. His shoulders were hunched, but the rest of him seemed too steady, too controlled. His voice trembled at all the right moments, like he had practiced every line before stepping into the room. He barely made eye contact, and when he finally did, it was brief, as if he was afraid I would see something he was trying hard to hide. He kept repeating the same words, whispering them like a chant. Sick, hospital, emergency. Every repetition felt heavier, but not with grief. There was something else beneath it, a strange calmness, a coldness he never had before. It was as if the story he was telling me was not happening to him, but to some character he had rehearsed in the mirror. I wanted to rush toward him, to hold him, to give him comfort, but something froze inside me, a thin, sharp doubt slicing through the moment. It rested quietly in my chest, almost polite, almost careful, but it would not leave. He packed in a hurry, or at least he pretended to. He tossed shirts into a bag without looking at them, zipping it up too fast, moving with the kind of urgency that felt staged. He brushed past me with a quick kiss on the forehead and whispered that he loved me. I believed the words, but the tone sounded like a recording, played back without emotion. Then he walked out the door, leaving a silence behind that did not feel like fear or grief. It felt like distance, a cold distance that was not meant for me to cross. I stood there for a long time, listening to the quiet hum of the refrigerator and the ticking of the clock on the kitchen wall. The space around me felt hollow, like something important had been removed from the air without my permission. I kept replaying his words in my mind. His mother is sick. He has to leave town. He needs space. But none of it sat right. At first, I tried to silence my doubt. I reminded myself of the good moments, the times he held me when I cried, the nights when he stayed up talking with me until sunrise. But another memory surfaced. A lie he once told about working late when he had been out drinking with friends. Another lie about losing his wallet that he later found in the pocket of his jacket. Little lies, harmless lies, the kind of lies you tell when you do not want to explain something, but lies nonetheless. My doubt grew teeth. Hours passed with no updates from him, no messages, no calls, nothing. I checked my phone so often that the screen began to feel warm in my hand. I refreshed it until my thumb ached, waiting for something that never came. At midnight, I sat alone on the couch, wrapped in a blanket I did not remember pulling over myself. The room felt cold, even though the heater was on. Outside, the wind tapped softly against the window, a slow and steady rhythm that made the silence between us feel wider. I finally checked his location, something we shared out of convenience more than trust. The little blue dot on the map was not anywhere near the hospital he claimed to be headed toward. It was nowhere near his mother's home either. It was somewhere else entirely, a place that made no sense. The doubt in my chest hardened into fear, then into clarity. Something was wrong, deeply wrong. I stared at the map for a long time before I whispered to myself, barely audible in the quiet room, "What are you really doing?" I did not have the answer yet, but the truth was already moving toward me, steady and unstoppable, like footsteps on a wooden floor in a dark room. And I felt it. I felt it coming long before I saw it. This was not the story he wanted me to believe. This was the one he never wanted me to find. Looking back, the signs were always there, small enough to ignore, but sharp enough to cut if I looked too closely. I used to think he lied only when he was embarrassed or when he wanted to avoid conflict. I told myself everyone lies sometimes, that it was normal to smooth out the truth to make life easier. But now I see those moments differently. They were not harmless. They were practice. The first time I caught him lying was about something so small it almost felt silly to question. He told me he never got my message, even though I had watched his phone light up with the notification. He blamed it on a glitch. Then he laughed it off and kissed me like it was nothing. I let it go. It felt easier to accept the version of reality he offered than to press for the one I sensed underneath. Months later, he lied again. He said he had to stay late at work, but when he got home, he smelled like whiskey. Not strong enough to reveal a wild night, but faint enough to suggest he had been somewhere he did not plan on telling me about. When I asked him about it, he smiled that gentle smile of his and told me one of his coworkers had insisted he try a new drink before heading home. A small thing, a harmless thing. I believed him, or I convinced myself I did. Then there was the time he promised he would call me when he arrived at his friend's house, but hours passed and silence stretched so long it swallowed my evening. When he finally picked up, he sounded distracted, almost annoyed. He said his phone died. He said he had left his charger in the car. He said he did not understand why I was making such a big deal out of nothing. I apologized, even though I was the one left waiting. Those moments gathered in my memory like loose threads, piling quietly in the corners of my mind. I never tied them together. I chose not to. Loving him meant giving him the benefit of the doubt, and doubt was something he always seemed to benefit from. But tonight, something felt different. His lies were not small, not casual, not the kind you toss out without thinking. Tonight, everything he said felt deliberate, built like a structure meant to collapse only after he was far enough away from the ruins. I tried to remind myself that maybe he really was overwhelmed. Maybe fear had driven him into panic. Maybe he needed space and did not know how to ask for it gently. But every explanation I created for him felt like another lie layered on top of his. By the time the clock crossed into early morning, my mind was no longer trying to protect him. It was trying to protect me. If his mother was truly sick, he would have found a moment to call. If he truly needed space, he would not have disappeared so completely. If he were truly telling the truth, I would not feel this deep weight in my chest, pressing down on something I had been trying to ignore for far too long. The little lies he told me before had been warnings. Not loud ones, not obvious ones, but soft, persistent reminders that he could bend the truth without breaking it. And each time I forgave him, he learned he could bend it further. Tonight was the night it finally snapped. As the house settled into its late-night stillness, I realized something painful. I had spent so much time defending him from suspicion that I had never stopped to ask who was defending me from him. That was the moment I decided to stop waiting. That was the moment I decided to find out what he was really doing. By the time the sun pushed a thin line of pale light across the blinds, I already knew I could not stay in the house any longer. My body felt restless, like it was refusing to sit still for one more lie. His silence through the night had become its own answer, a hollow space where the truth should have been. I showered, dressed, and grabbed my keys without thinking. My hands were shaking, but my mind was clear. I needed to know where he really was. The drive to his mother's town felt longer than it should have. The highway stretched out in front of me like a question I was afraid to answer. I had driven this road many times before, usually with him in the passenger seat, singing along to the radio or teasing me about my driving. Today, the road felt different. Cold, wide, empty. When I pulled into her driveway, I rehearsed the lie I planned to tell. I told myself I would ask gently. I would not raise suspicion. I would not let panic show on my face. I knocked on the door with a quiet hope that maybe, just maybe, she really was sick and he truly was with her. But then she opened the door. She stood there, smiling brightly, healthy as ever, wearing a soft robe covered in small blue flowers. The warm smell of baking drifted from inside the house, and behind her I could hear the faint sound of a radio playing an old familiar song. I froze, not because she looked well, but because she looked surprised to see me in a way that did not match the story he had given me. "Sweetheart," she said softly, "what are you doing here so early?" I swallowed the knot in my throat and forced out the words, "I just wanted to check on you." "Check on me?" she repeated, almost laughing. "Why would you need to check on me?" I didn't know how to answer. I tried to think. I tried to stitch together something believable. But the longer I stood there, the more the truth pressed against my ribs. "Come inside," she said gently. "I just made tea." I stepped into the house, and everything inside felt painfully familiar and unbearably wrong. The air was warm. The kitchen windows let in the morning sun. She hummed softly as she poured hot water into delicate cups painted with tiny golden leaves. She handed one to me, her hand steady, her eyes full of the same kindness she had always shown me. "Sit," she said. "Tell me what is going on." I sat at her table, the same table where he and I had eaten countless meals, laughing and planning the future. Now I held a worn cup between my palms, trying not to let it slip from my trembling hands. "He told me he was here," I said quietly. "He told me you were sick." She blinked, confused. "Sick? Me? Oh no, dear, I am perfectly fine. I would have called you if something was wrong." Her words fell into the room like stones dropping into water, sending ripples through everything I thought I knew. I forced a smile. "Maybe I misunderstood." She shook her head gently. "No, I spoke to him 2 days ago. He said he was busy with some big work trip coming up. Sounded excited about it, too. He did not mention anything about being sick or coming to visit." My heart thudded so loudly I wondered if she could hear it. "He told you he was going on a trip?" I asked. She nodded. "He said he had to prepare for something important. He seemed proud." Proud. That word spread through my mind like ice. The mother of the man I loved sat across from me, sipping tea, talking about her son with warmth, unaware that he had used her as the perfect shield for his lie. I stared down into my cup, watching the steam twist and disappear. My throat tightened. My fingers pressed into the porcelain as if the cup were the only thing keeping me anchored to the chair. "Are you all right, dear?" she asked softly. I lied. I told her I had not slept much. I told her I just needed to clear my mind. I told her I would be fine. But inside, something had cracked open. I left her house with a smile I did not feel. She hugged me goodbye at the door, unaware she was comforting someone who had just learned her son was capable of lies deeper than she could imagine. As I walked back to my car, the world felt strangely quiet. The truth was beginning to reveal itself, slow and deliberate. I just needed one more piece, one more answer, and I knew exactly where to find it. I sat in my car for a long time after leaving his mother's house, staring at the steering wheel, feeling the engine vibrate beneath my hands. I had come looking for answers, but all I found were new questions, sharper and heavier than anything I expected. If he was not here, and he was not at the hospital, then where was he? And why had he chosen a lie so fragile it shattered the moment I touched it? I opened my phone again, hoping he might have called, hoping for some explanation that would make all of this feel less surreal. Nothing. No messages, no missed calls, no updates. The blue dot on the map showed him somewhere far from where he claimed to be, but the dot alone wasn't enough. I needed proof. I needed clarity. I needed to see the truth with my own eyes. That was when I remembered something. Months ago, he had logged into his photo backup account on my tablet while trying to find a picture for a project. He must have forgotten to log out. The thought made my stomach twist, not because I wanted to invade his privacy, but because he had already broken the trust that privacy depends on. I opened the app. For a moment, nothing happened. The screen stayed blank, loading slowly, almost hesitantly, as if it understood the weight of what it was about to show me. Then the thumbnails appeared, one by one, falling into place like pieces of a puzzle I never wanted to solve. The most recent folder was time-stamped from the night before. I clicked it. The first photo hit me like a slap. He was not alone. He was standing in a decorated room filled with balloons and soft pastel colors. Blue and pink streamers hung from the ceiling. A banner stretched across the back wall, printed in bold, cheerful letters. It was a gender reveal party. My breathing stopped. There he was, the man who told me he was too scared to think about children, who insisted he was not ready for that stage of life. He was holding a confetti cannon with both hands, smiling wider than I had seen in months. Someone next to him, a woman I recognized only vaguely from old stories he brushed off, had her hands on her stomach. Her stomach. Her pregnant stomach. The next photo showed him wrapping his arms around her from behind, resting his cheek against her hair, as if the moment belonged to him, as if the future was his to celebrate, as if I had never existed. Another photo, the confetti exploding in a cloud of bright blue. He was laughing, head thrown back, eyes glowing with pure joy, pure pride, pure excitement for a life he claimed he never wanted. Another photo, him kneeling beside her, kissing her belly. My hands started shaking so violently the phone almost slipped from my fingers. I could not breathe. My throat closed around a sound I refused to release. The car felt smaller, hotter, too tight to contain the truth spreading through me. He had not lied because he needed space. He had not lied because he was overwhelmed. He had lied because he was celebrating the future he promised me we were not ready for. A future he never intended to share with me. A future he had already chosen with someone else. The betrayal was not just the affair. It was every conversation where he told me he was unsure. Every time he made me feel unreasonable for dreaming about a family. Every moment he said he wanted to take things slow. He did not fear commitment. He feared commitment with me. The realization struck with a cold, absolute clarity. All the lies suddenly made sense. He had built a life behind my back, a life bright enough to take pictures of, a life joyful enough to announce publicly, a life he kept hidden because he knew exactly what it would do to me. The truth did not come to me quietly. It arrived loud and merciless, like the sound of confetti cannons bursting open in a room filled with people celebrating a moment that was meant to break me. I sat there in silence, throat tight, tears burning at the edges of my vision, staring at the evidence that the man I trusted had already moved on without telling me he had ever left. I closed the app slowly, my fingers numb against the screen. Now I knew where he was, and now I knew exactly what I had to do. I drove straight to him, not to the house we shared, but to the address pinned in one of the background photos. A rental house with a long gravel driveway and a porch light that flickered weakly against the fading afternoon sun. I parked at the edge of the property and sat there for a moment, letting my breath settle into something steady. My heart was still bruised from what I had seen, but beneath the pain was a strange stillness, a clarity I had never felt before. I walked up the driveway slowly, listening to the crunch of gravel under my feet. The closer I got, the more I could hear faint laughter drifting from inside the house. Soft, warm, carefree laughter, the kind of sound you make when you believe no one is watching, the kind of sound he had not shared with me in a long time. I knocked, not loud, just enough to be heard. It took a few seconds before the door opened, and when it did, he stood there staring at me like I was a ghost rising from the ground. His eyes widened, his jaw slackened. Then he shifted, rearranging his expression into something softer, something apologetic. "I thought you were at home," he said quietly, as if that could undo everything. I did not answer. He stepped outside and closed the door behind him with a gentle click, as if trying to protect the life waiting inside. He rubbed the back of his neck and sighed. "Look, I know you must be confused. I can explain. It is not what it looks like. The oldest lie in the world, delivered with the weakest confidence." I still said nothing. He tried again, his voice softening into that familiar tone he always used when he wanted forgiveness. "I am sorry. things just got complicated. I didn't want to hurt you. I just needed some time to figure things out. You showing up like this is not fair. You have to understand I am going through a lot right now." I let him talk. Let him twist his words into one more knot. Let him perform the same tired script he had used so many times before. He took a step closer, lowering his voice as if proximity could erase betrayal. "I promise it is not serious," he whispered. "She just needs support right now. That is all this is." He lied to me again, even after everything. Even now. I finally reached into my bag. His eyes flicked toward my hand, then back to my face. He looked nervous, but still hopeful, like he believed I had come here to cry or plead or fall apart so he could comfort me just enough to keep both worlds intact. Instead, I took out the printed photo, the one of him standing beneath the banner, the one of him smiling while blue confetti rained down, the one where his hands rested on her stomach like he had been waiting his whole life for that moment. I did not speak. I did not need to. I placed the photo in his hand. He stared at it. His face shifted, one emotion collapsing into another. Shock, panic, fear. Then something almost like resentment, as if he was angry I had found the truth he meant to keep hidden. His lips parted, searching for a lie that could survive this. Nothing came out. He looked up at me, eyes trembling, breath uneven. I could see the moment he realized there was nowhere left to run inside the story he had created. Every excuse he tried to summon died before it reached his mouth. I finally spoke. "You said your mother was sick." His throat tightened around a single swallow. "I can explain." I shook my head once. "No, you cannot." He opened his mouth again, but the air around us felt heavy and final. He sensed it. I could see the truth settling into him, dragging down his shoulders, turning his voice hollow. "Please, just give me a chance. I did not mean for it to happen this way." I took a slow step back. "You never meant to tell me at all." His eyes flooded with something I could not name. Regret, maybe? Fear? Or just the realization that he had finally run out of lies sturdy enough to stand on. Behind the closed door, I heard faint laughter again, a reminder of the life he had chosen, a life he had hidden behind a dying mother who was not dying, behind a crisis that never existed, behind a story he expected me to mourn while he celebrated somewhere else. I turned away, not because I wanted to hurt him, but because there was nothing left worth facing. He reached out a hand, but I did not look back. He had already taken too much from me. There was nothing left he was allowed to hold. I drove without knowing where I was going. The road stretched out in front of me in a blur of headlights and fading daylight, but it felt steadier than anything I had stood on in the past months. My hands gripped the wheel, not out of fear, but out of something quieter, something like release. For the first time since he walked out with that hurried bag and that rehearsed story, the air felt breathable again. I did not cry at first, not in the driveway, not in the car, not even when I reached the first stoplight and saw the faint reflection of myself in the window. I looked strangely calm, almost unfamiliar, like the version of me staring back had already let go while I was still catching up. When the tears finally came, they were not violent or loud. They slipped out slowly, quietly, the way truth sometimes seeps into your life without asking permission. I let them fall because I knew they were not for him. They were for me. For the months I spent doubting my instincts, for the lies I talked myself into believing, for the future I held alone while he built another somewhere else. I pulled over at a small, empty park and sat under a tree, listening to the wind move through the branches. For a long time, I replayed the moment he looked at that photo, the way his face crumpled under the weight of his own lies. I realized something then. something painful but strangely freeing. He had not been afraid of commitment. He had not been unsure about family. He had not been overwhelmed by life or responsibility. He simply did not want those things with me. He wanted them with someone else. It was a truth that cut deep at first, but as I sat there, breathing in the cool night air, I felt the edge dull just enough for clarity to take its place. I had been holding on to a version of him that never truly existed, a version built from hope and softness and excuses. But the man who lied about his mother being sick was the real him, and I had ignored that reality because loving him felt easier than confronting who he had become, or who he had always been. Eventually, my breathing steadied, my heartbeat slowed, the ache in my chest settled into something familiar, something I knew I could survive. Betrayal does not break you all at once. It unbuilds you quietly, piece by piece, until you find the strength to gather yourself again. I stood under the tree and looked up at the dark sky, the stars barely visible behind thin clouds. For the first time in a long time, the world felt honest. Brutal, yes, harsh, but honest. I realized then that the truth, as painful as it had been to uncover, hurt less than the illusion I had been living in. An illusion where he cared, where he tried, where his lies were small enough to overlook. The truth had ripped through all of that, leaving me with something raw but real. There is a strange kind of peace in knowing the worst is behind you. I walked back to my car feeling lighter, though the sadness still lingered at the edges like a familiar shadow. It would not disappear overnight, but it no longer controlled me. He no longer controlled me. As I closed the door and turned the key in the ignition, I whispered one final thought, not to him, but to myself. Sometimes the life you lose is the life that was never meant for you. And sometimes the truth you fear the most is the one that finally sets you free.